Greetings shippers, welcome back, and it's time for another surprise ships, Shipoween edition. That's right, more scary films. Well, your mileage may vary on how scary this outing in particular is. This one's gonna be a bit interesting, because it's gonna take us to a film and its remake. One that has a firm role within queer coding history, and another that has a more firm footing in the shipping fandom. We're talking about Fright Night. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please do follow on social media so that you never miss a vid, and of course, just to come down and chit chat about fandom. It's a good time, I swear. So, Fright Night. What exactly is this film about? Well, the remakes are very similar, with only a few minor tweaks or changes, but they do make a big difference. However, the plot is not one of them. The film centers around Charlie Brewster, who is a bit outlandish, a bit eccentric, and he has a thing for horror movies and the horror genre, and a big imagination. So when a new neighbor moves in, and things seem to be a bit suspicious, well, not everybody believes Charlie when he comes to the conclusion that his neighbor is in fact a vampire. The only problem? Charlie's right. And now it's up to him to keep his unbelieving friends and family safe. So from here on out, we're going to of course issue the usual spoiler warning, because we're going to have to touch upon a couple of topics to examine the ships within this film, or films, as we're going to be talking about both versions. So firstly, let's hop back to the 80s, 1985 to be exact, and examine just what exactly it is about this film that stands out to so many people.
What would you do if you accidentally discovered the house next door was occupied by something not human? Something horrifying. Something unspeakably evil.
Well, for many, this is a well-remembered, endearing 80s horror outing, with some solid effects, memorable characters, although your mileage may vary upon the acting choices made, but that just depends on how you like your acting aesthetic. It also had a very solid vampire portrayal. Again, just like Hellraiser, which we discussed last time, which if you missed, link down below, or of course you can click the card on the side, this film too has some practical effects that really hold up. Not all of them, especially if you're watching the Blu-ray version, which is unforgiving to all things, especially anything remotely flawed. This film, at the time, and more so retroactively, has been one of the films examined for some latent queer coding. During the late 80s and early 90s, it was not uncommon to find coding within horror movies, as it was easy to slip certain things in, especially when working within certain mythos. Vampires, of course, are no exception. There are some who read much into the fact that Jerry, yes, the vampire's name is Jerry, goes undercover in the neighborhood in the original film with a familiar, a male familiar. In fact, it is just assumed by many of the neighbors that they are a gay couple. And the film does seem to back up that that is at least part of their relationship. Although, that is part of Jerry's relationship with everybody. Jerry is trying to seduce everybody in this movie. All the people. Even the people he's trying to kill. Especially the people he's trying to kill. There are also some who read much into the scene wherein Jerry seduces Evil Ed, Charlie's friend, and makes him one of his vampire minions.
You don't have to be afraid of me. I know what it's like being different. Only they won't pick on you anymore. Or beat you up. I'll see to that.
Now, mileage varies on this, as some read it as a metaphor for gay seduction, and others read it more just as the usual vampire lore. As is seen later, he very much does a similar thing to Amy, the female protagonist. Some of the lore for this film has also been built upon who was cast and information that came out about certain actors later on. For example, the actor who played Evil Ed left mainstream media to become a gay porn star, hardcore gay porn. The actress who played Amy came out in the 1990s as a lesbian, and has been a prominent figure in that community ever since. Roddy Mcdowall, playing Peter Vincent, was known at the time for being someone you would cast if there were certain inclinations you wanted to imply about a character, and many feel that his portrayal comes across as highly effeminate. Although again, some of this is difficult to read because of distance from the decade. When people look back upon the 80s, they remember it a certain way. A lot of the nuance is lost, so a lot of the 80s is just read as general, bombastic glam all over. So if something is more or less glam than what was typical in the 80s is a bit more difficult for a modern viewer to gauge that. So of course, as always, the best way to examine these things is to go into it yourself. See how much coding you feel is there, how much of it is inferred retroactively, and if there is any reaching, or if there is just as much as people say there is, particularly as the modern viewer is much more willing to look at things outside of the heteronormative lens. All of that is for you to determine, and the only way to do that is to check out the film. So, with all of that said, what was the shipping landscape like? Well, there are those who were working through ships at the time, and who were indeed hardcore fans of this film. However, in this time period, it is a bit more difficult to organize and get fiction out there without a large support system. There are, of course, general zines that are just publishing fiction, but it is also common to have targeted zines, such as the Star Treks or the Blake Sevens of the world, meaning that it was much easier for things to circulate if they had a loud, vocal fan base that was really pushing for it. So it became the case, as it was for many horror films of this era, for this to remain a more academic, theoretical examination, with some smatterings of fics here and there, but mostly came to be remembered as a film with significant coding. And indeed, some who have watched the film from the modern era do go back and write fics for it. And the pairings there do vary, mostly Jerry with various individuals within the film, because, well, it's Jerry. So, fast forward to 2011, the year of the remake. Fright Night is not a remake that people often complain about, except in the general sense that some feel that remakes are entirely unnecessary. However, in this case, as this film was so firmly rooted in the 80s, many felt that it could use an update, and that it could do no harm. And for the most part, Fright Night's remake has been well received, some going so far as to call it a near-perfect remake. Again, mileage will vary, so if you're really intrigued to see how that does, watch them both. But what the Fright Night remake did have was shipping. A decent amount of shipping. More so than its original counterpart, or at least a more trackable amount, as it is easier than ever to enter a fandom, and much easier to just produce, upload, and get your ship out there, without needing a whole network of support to do so. So for this remake, what changed? Well, there were a few tweaks. Jerry's characterization is definitely changed. Less flamboyant 80s glam, definitely less dad sweaters, and it's replaced with more of a confident menace. Not that Chris Sarandon's Jerry couldn't project this, but it definitely comes through a lot more with Colin Farrell's version. The other main change is giving much more characterization to the Ed side character, as well as to Charlie's mom, who actually gets to be a character this time round, and not just a running joke. And the different direction of Peter Vincent. Instead of a washed-up older television actor, we're dealing with a washed-up Chris Angel-style David Tennant. So they de-aged the role considerably, and that definitely did have an impact on the shipping. For there is a lot of shipping in this community between Jerry and Peter. Now, their histories are slightly modified as well, as they gave Peter a more legitimate vampire fighting history than the one he had in the original. They also add a personal history between the two characters. But again, these are minor tweaks, and overall, the story remains very much the same. Though the tone and modernization aspects do make a huge difference in how it is received and read. However, because of this update in casting, the scenes between Jerry and Peter are read differently, and admittedly it does have to do with some of the casting choice, and the general attractiveness that most people feel can be applied to both of the actors in question. There is also a general ageist tendency in fandom to prefer to pair the young, as many fics do end up culminating in smut. And elder smut is not a place that all shippers are prepared to go. Not every pairing can be older Charles and Eric. The film also has some more problematic ships for age gap reasons, though many who ship these pairings contextualize them within the film itself, with the logic being that with everything they all went through, it very much alters the dynamic. Although for some, that is no excuse. Again, mileage varies, and especially given as this was 2011, these concerns were not as prevalent, or definitely not as voiced when you entered a shipping fandom. There was much more of an idea that this was a space to just explore whatever came to one's head without there necessarily being these overarching or negative implications. Of course, whether or not one feels those implications are as grand as certain other shippers feel is very much an ongoing discussion. And indeed, some feel that this is an argument that need not apply for this particular film, as it is not equally applied, as the same concern is not usually levied against the relationships between humans and vampire. So some shippers feel that this indicates a level of cognitive dissonance, and some go so far as to cry hypocrisy, although again, this is very rare for this fandom, and some feel the two should be judged differently. So who are these pairings? Well, of course, we have the pairing of Peter and Charlie, and an OT3, of Peter, Charlie, and Amy. Although sometimes this can just transition into a more friendship element, especially because, as with the early film, one of the cruxes is, how are Charlie and Amy going to have sex? Are they going to have sex? Is that going to happen? They certainly don't seem to have a place to do so, and Charlie is really distracted. Well, for some, that is worked through by Peter giving them his place to hang out in. He does have a very sweet place in the movie.
Dude! I know, just sorry. I left my phone. I'll just be, look, I'm not looking, I promise. See, I can't see a thing. All right, that's it, I'm out of here, it's all yours. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. That doesn't narrow it down.
In both versions, the inherent shippability is not that surprising, nor is the undercurrent of UST and sexuality, as that has very much become part of the vampire mythos and lore. The appeal and sensuality of these creatures offering immortality, couched in death. The push and pull and appeal of the mysterious and the forbidden. However, the question remains for many, is there as much coding in the update as there was in the original? And the answer most come to is no. Definitely not. Although, this is something that really must be examined by looking at both films and examining how much coding was present in the first place, and if there is really as little as people think present in the update, which usually requires an examination of differences in viewing habits, trends, and how certain subsets of society are presented. The update has indeed drawn more people to check out the original, and its cult classic sequel, Fright Night Part 2. There is also a sequel to the remake, but people tend not to talk about that. So for those of you who enjoy vampire pairings, and especially vampire slayer pairings, and if you like that little added twist of the slayer not being the most competent or well brave, then this is definitely a ship to check out. Also, if you enjoyed the dynamics of the characters, it is a fun fandom to explore and see what it has to offer. It's small but friendly, and keeps very much in tone with the film, which has that comedic undercurrent, as Fright Night is hardly what one could call straight horror. Pun. It was an accident. The best kind. Are any of you fans of Fright Night? If so, which version do you prefer? Or do you like both? Do you have any ships? Were you already shipping from the original version, or do you prefer the update? Are you a vampire person? Some people really enjoy them, and others feel that they're overdone. Leave all of your answers down below, and number them if you can. You know I love a good essay comment. So, today's costume outing is stereotypical mod 60s chick. I actually did the eye modding, but it's kind of hard to see. I'll get closer. I'm gonna get obnoxiously close. See, it's there. It's just kind of hard to see. See, I told you, you can do lots of nice, simple things for Halloween, and they can still have a decent impact. Also, I think it would be easy to walk around like this and people wouldn't notice until they got really close and realized that you'd drawn on a whole extra set of eyelashes. Speaking of Shippaween and costumes, the Shippaween t-shirts and, well, whatever else you want it to be are here. Celebrate Shippaween all year round with your Shippaween shirt. These are available through the month of October. So if you're interested, hop on over, the link will be down below. I hope that you are enjoying Shippaween. I certainly am, and we're gonna go a bit more mainstream and back to a classic style vid next time. If you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit that bell for notifications so that you never miss a vid. And also, if you enjoyed this video, share it around. It really does help. The YouTube algorithm, it does things. There are, as always, more videos coming soon, and I can't wait to share them with you. Until then, let's get to the outro. Bye-bye. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all of my patrons, names on the side, for helping to make these videos possible. There are, as always, more videos coming soon, so stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.